Hi, this is Mark Mohammadpour, and welcome to Chasing the Sun, the show designed for communications, marketing, and public relations professionals to learn how they can incorporate health and wellness, reduce stress, grow in their career, and thrive. You can reach me at chasingthesunpdx.com or on Instagram or Twitter at Markmo, M-A-R-K-M-O-H. I'm starting off 2020 with a great guy, Brandon Laws, Director of Marketing for Xenium HR, an HR services company here in Portland, Oregon. We talk a lot about personal and corporate branding and how Brandon has done an incredible job balancing the two. He runs his own podcast called Transform Your Workplace, which I've been on. We cover a number of topics, but I think this is just a really important time when we think about transforming ourselves. We think about resolutions. We think about a lot of change at the new year. And so I wanted to talk to Brandon about how he lives his best life, about branding, about how he prioritizes his health and wellness, his time at Xenium HR, and advice for people who are looking to make changes of their own. It's a great start to 2020. Brandon, thank you so much for your time, and listeners, enjoy. Thanks so much. All right. Well, I am really excited to have Brandon Laws on the show this week. Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm excellent. It's weird to be on this side of the microphone,
isn't it? Though
yeah.
It's some pressure is taken off, but yet it's a different type of pressure on you, and you're the guest. You are the you're the subject of the conversation.
Yeah. And I typically don't love talking about myself, so we'll see how this goes.
We're gonna have a good time. Brandon and I have known each other over the last several years through mutual friend, and here in the Portland area, you are a degree or two away from pretty much anybody professionally. I think for as big of a city this is, I think it's very easy to find connections.
Very small town.
And you are in the marketing world for an HR services company.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that, your role, and how long you've been here?
It's kind of it's a weird role. I mean, now it's much more defined, but I've been with this company 11 years now.
Xenium HR.
Xenium HR. We're an HR and payroll processing company. So like what we do is we partner with small and medium-sized companies, those that, they can't figure it out on their own. So they use a company like us. So when I first started back in 2008, and you know what that time was like,
Absolutely.
It was wild. I started in like a basic operations role. Like I think operations assistant was my title. 25 employees at the time. Things were pretty rocky. We're a very stable company. So like I started then and doing some really administrative things, state licensing, workers' comp reporting, boring stuff like that, right? No offense to people who do all that. But we had a sales staff and we didn't have marketing at the time. We basically outsourced a newsletter and our blog to like some freelancer, right? And so like, I had interest in all that. I did video stuff back in high school and college and had an interest in the creatives. I was good at website building, those sort of things. So I started like pulling back some of those things, stopped outsourcing them, brought them in-house, and I was doing those things in addition to my regular job. So as the sales process has really shifted over time. Like we have a sales staff of 3, but 4 if you count our VP of sales. But the way in which people are buying now is changing so rapidly that you almost have to lean on, like when you look at a sales funnel, like marketing almost has like 80 or 90% of it now. And it's like people are researching and doing all this stuff online first, right? And so search engine optimization became important, the PR stuff, all the awards and things that you would do on the PR side, and communication, content marketing, pay-per-click advertising. I'm not a huge fan of that, but like the list goes on. So this role, it evolved into something that was much bigger, and I've really leaned heavily on building the brand, and content marketing and lead gen really comes out of that. So my role now is evolved. I'm director of marketing. I've been in this role for probably 4 or 5 years, and I've got one person on my staff that is really a sales coordinator and marketing coordinator, kind of all in one. And then I use a lot of freelancers for creative stuff, so copywriters and coders and anything complicated. So yeah,
Brandon, that's incredible. I mean, you've over the last 10, 11 years, you have built a role at a growing company.
Yeah.
You've learned on the job, which I imagine you got a lot of support, but you also went to go after key things you needed to learn.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Years ago, I had met, and this is not when I was at Xenium, but years ago, I was in insurance sales.
Okay.
The most commoditized.
Right.
I just did not like it. Some people, it's for some people, but not for me. I met somebody during that time who I ended up selling a life insurance policy to, and we just like kicked around ideas about economics and finances and stuff, and he said, you need to read these books. It's Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and like one other one is like self-development. He's like, I read all the time, and you know, these are foundational books. So I started picking them up, and I was never a big reader in college or even high school before that, and read those. I couldn't stop reading after that. For some reason, I had this love of learning, and reading was the kind of the primary way in which I was continuing to develop myself. So with marketing, it's a lot easier because there's a lot of blogs out there. There's a lot of podcasts, and of course, there's a lot of books. I tend to do a lot more trend-based ideas in marketing that are books because things change so fast.
Yeah.
So like if you do something technical, it's outdated by the time it's published. So yeah, self-learner. I read, in fact, this year I've read more books than I ever have. 65 books.
That's incredible.
Year.
Congratulations.
So it's important to keep learning.
How do you do that? What are your steps to reading a book, taking something from it? Do you have a system to, you know, how do you from start to finish, how does that happen? Then how do you implement what you've taken?
That's a great question. Primarily because I don't really have a system necessarily. It's sort of organic the way it goes. So I read a lot on my Kindle app on my phone. So highlighting is really easy. So I can always refer back to the notes. Paperback, I tend to get shipped a lot of books for podcast interviews that I do with authors. So those are a little harder because I'm having to actually physically write notes. So a lot of times I'll be reading, and then I will translate it, either dictate it into my phone, like on Microsoft OneNote is how I compile notes. And so I'll refer back to those because I have to craft basically an outline for an interview. And in other cases where it's like Audible, like I can't really take notes there. So the question, I ponder that one because I don't know if I'm applying everything I'm learning really well. I think there's some things that just stick out to me, and then it'll make a lasting impression on me. So I'll go back to it later or be thinking about it. And a lot of times, like I'm sure you read a lot, but when you read something that's so profound and it just like it hits you, and you're like, I've got to do this. What am I doing? Like I need to take action. And so a lot of times it's in the moment. It'll spark something. And I think by taking in as much information as you can, some people can get paralyzed by it, but for me, like I think the more inputs you have, the more likely you are to have that aha moment where you can make a decision and take action. Otherwise, you read one book and you think it's, you're going to implement everything. That's just it's not possible. I don't think
you're absolutely right. Just yesterday, it wasn't a book, but I joined a 90-minute webinar about workshops, about building workshops and getting the right content, because that's a lot about what I'm doing with Chasing the Sun. And it was something that I could have very easily just listened to the recording the next day or received the PowerPoint deck from the presenter. But I listened in real time, and I took 10 to 15 to-do items. Yeah. Now my next step is to go back to that list and say, okay, Mark, what are the 5 things I'm really going to do? Because to your point, you can't do it all. But the fact of just being there in real time and taking the notes, and I'm just really big on that. I just wrapped up a conference call with somebody, and I didn't have all the people that I needed on that call, so I was a little frustrated. But I said, you know what? These are the action items I'm going to take away from it, and we're gonna go, and I'm going to own. I'm going to drive it. I think that's really key. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, but I hear you in taking the notes after the webinar, and I'm like, man, I could be better. I think we can all improve. I think that's the point, is like you get a little bit better every day, or you build a system, and I think you just have to try a bunch of things. And for me, I'm still figuring it out.
If you get one thing out of what you're learning, this is a fascinating thing about my coaching with Chasing the Sun, is that repetition is really key, because we get so much information, and I'm talking about making big life changes, whether it's reducing stress, reducing your weight, thinking about career changes, talking about team management. I could give people 50 to 60 things to do. They're going to be overwhelmed. What is one thing you're going to do?
Yeah.
What are two things you're going to do? Because for me, it's about confidence, and confidence is a lot about completing things and feeling a lot of confidence around completing it. And it's about the small things. And that's definitely something that I really try to
and I think,
with folks.
and on that note, in talking about like coaching and managing people too, like I think the best coaches in the world would say like, okay, I think of like golf, for example, because you can get your own head with that. And I like golf, and a coach could, bad ones would say like, okay, you need to fix this, and you have like 10 things to think of, and it's like, it's hard to implement it all, and you're just going to mess it all up, versus like good ones would kind of watch you and say, let's focus on this one first, and you got to hit 1,000 balls this way. And I think it's the same like individually. Like if you try to do too much, you're going to just stress yourself out, and it's likely not going to stick. Habits build by doing it all the time and repetitious. So I don't know. I try to keep it simple.
I think you're absolutely right. I'd love to go back to your role here as Director of Marketing, because we're going to publish this in January. A lot of people are thinking about making changes. Can you talk about how that role came to be? What was your role in developing it? Was it developed from scratch? What does that look like? And then what advice might you have for people who are looking at jobs or are trying to think about how to create their own role? Because it feels like that's what you've done. What advice would you give to people who are thinking about that, who might feel overwhelmed or not really aware that they can do that? Because it feels like you've set a best practice for how to do so.
Yeah, and I think when you come into a system that's already established, it's a little harder to probably create your own role or titles. I was coming into a small business that was evolving, it was growing, and we were adding employees, and our goals were to hit big sales. And so like it happened to evolve for me like that, and I had titles that were never in existence here at this company. So there were no true marketers on staff. I really had to either seek outside resources or learn on my own. So it's the evolution of this role was truly from within. And I think that's the fascinating thing, is that I really did have a vision for how the marketing could go at this organization. And I saw the way things were going too. And I think if you read enough things and talk to enough people, you could sort of see what the trends are going to be, and how, and this goes for any position, but like in terms of marketing, it was the evolution of the buying, the buyer cycle or whatever. So how people are getting their information, how they're making decisions, and truly where your audience is hanging out. I think that's the biggest key too. So yeah, it became a need to figure out where's the audience at, what kind of words are resonating with them. This whole idea of thought leadership, we're doing a podcast right now like that. Those kind of things were important. So it just became a natural progression. And the thing is, like you probably know right now, is when you start a business and you have to now market yourself. Did you know how to do all this podcasting stuff? Did you know how to launch a webinar? You had to go learn it. Yeah. So I think that's the thing in any role is if you have the stamina and energy to learn all this and do it. I mean, that's kind of the advice I give people is just do it.
Absolutely.
And try it. Like, don't wait till it's perfect either.
Right. Oh my gosh. My stuff I'm doing is far from perfect, but I'm trying and I'm doing and I'm listening to feedback. And I think that's what's important. And I feel like I have the energy for it. Yeah. Like I feel like I'm.
They probably give you a renewed energy, right?
Absolutely.
Like you came from a corporate type of PR job, and probably wore a suit every day at work. And
no, this is Portland.
I know.
In the creative, no, it's a good question though. In the creative world, for the most part, you can pretty much wear whatever.
I know.
But I understand what you're saying. You definitely have some constraints, and now that I'm on my own, there are no constraints. Sometimes you want constraints. Yeah. Sometimes you need a box, and there are days that I wish I had some. But for the most part, I'm really happy to not have.
I know it is funny, like with you on your own now. It's like you have to define what that that box is. Otherwise, I mean, you could just wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on this, and have no real set plan.
Exactly. I'm doing a lot of blocking off time in my calendar to do things and stuff like that. I'm trying to heed my own advice.
Did you ever read that book, Deep Work by Cal Newport? Read that, because it's it'll allow you to think about how to focus and true projects that are important. So I appreciate highly encourage that.
I'll put that in the notes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about podcasting and in concert with your role here, because I think one of the many things I wanted to talk to you about is how you build your own personal brand within an organization, and how you not only build it yourself, but with respect to the company that pays you and compensates you for your work. Talk about Transform Your Workplace, which is your podcast. I was really honored to be on your show, and it was a lot of fun.
It was great to have you.
Thank you. And how that came to be, and how you've built that balance, because I think a lot of people are thinking about how they can build their personal brand but still stay true to their organization. What does that look like to you, and then what advice may you have for people who are looking to do something similar?
Yeah, so I use this analogy a lot with people who are trying to balance between the company brand and the personal brand, because I think this illustrates it well. So think of ESPN, right? It's this giant media company, and they put out content, okay? But a lot of times it's the authors and the reporters within it that you're following. Like Twitter especially has made this popular, where you tend to follow people who write really good pieces for whatever sport you like, right? So ESPN's this kind of overarching brand, and if you just followed the feed of the content, you would get a mix of stuff that you don't even like in the first place. So, but with reporters and authors that you really enjoy, you get a lot of that, and it's laser focused. And I think of the personal brand kind of the same way. It's just like at a corporate or small business level, it's, people like to follow people, not necessarily brands.
Absolutely.
So like Xenium could put out a bunch of content, but what if people like what I say, and so they'd rather follow me than the company, because they're going to get it right for me, and they're going to get like a maybe a slight opinion on the same topic, whereas a company might put something pretty vanilla out, but maybe there's some flair with me. My take on it. Maybe people do. I don't think people really care what I think, by the way, but
I think they do. But what you're doing from a business to business standpoint is a best practice.
Yeah,
I am tired of business to business organizations using their social channels exclusively for sales.
It's
download
annoying.
this white paper.
Let's add value.
It's no value. They don't think about it in terms of engagement, which is why I have always tried to champion the idea that social media and those channels need to be built from the PR and comm cell.
100% agree.
And it's not necessarily an issue of skill. It's not a disrespect to marketing, but it is. These are the folks that understand engagement, and they can work with the sales team. They can work with the marketing on the call to action. But if every single piece of content is specifically geared towards sales and specific call to action, you're not going to care about your audience. And which is why having a voice behind the brand from a B2B standpoint is really critical, because there are other people on the other side of the.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's this book I read years ago by Gary Vaynerchuk. It was jab, 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 right hook, or whatever. And it was like the idea was and the book's great because it actually it shows you really good ideas of like social media captions and calls to action. And the idea was that the jab is you give them value, you give them those nuggets, and then they're going to appreciate you for that. And then the right hook is that main call to action that gets them to take action, and maybe you get a sale. But like I think people who use it strictly as just sales or self-serve and stuff, it's not going to work. But I like that people are really starting to figure out the personal brand side of it too. I think the best marketers inside of Xenium are all the people within it. It's not if I'm going to push out content solely from the Xenium brand, how is that going to benefit anybody? I think businesses and owners, and they're human. They were more likely to connect with the people in those, outside those walls right there, and connect with them rather than the brand itself. So I'm trying to encourage people to do that. And like I talk to people, and that's what I would say to them.
I think you could not be more right. And this is coming back to communications, internal communications, executive communications, the importance of being able to help the team be advocates for the brand, and to your point, speak on their own social media channels, primarily LinkedIn, but wherever else, and be able to talk, accurately and smart and about what's going on is going to resonate so much bigger than the brand, I think.
Yeah.
So
there's also risks, I think, associated with building personal brand within the company brand. I think that's where you really were kind of not necessarily going to the dark side of it, but I mean, you could have somebody that's doing something you don't like,
right?
But yet it's reflecting on the company brand. So I think you have to not necessarily police it, but build some rules around it, especially if you're going to bring it all back to the company brand. So, and the other risk is that what if a personal brand becomes so much bigger than the company brand? And I've seen that happen from afar. And that's always interesting because if that person leaves, how much of the visibility and audience goes with it? So that's a risk. It's something I've been asked about with the podcasts that I do.
Sure.
And I don't know the answer. I think I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon, so I think it's not risky, but it's something to watch out for.
You have an installation of trust, and I think the fact that you have the brand and calls to action as needed, but you're not overselling your products and services throughout. I think it's a good balance, and it is thinking about if you were to leave, who's going to take over and making sure that someone is waving that flag. I think that's a big deal, but that's not a decision or a discussion for today. So you talk about building your personal brand, talking about building your within your organization. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is you're a father.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of different folks on my show from a number of different vantage points. I have a brand new mother who was on recently. I have had people who are living with particular health conditions, and they are all figuring out how to thrive. You are, at least as far as what I can see from your social media channels, you work out a lot. You bring in your kids to work out. I think it's a lot of fun, and you seem to be enjoying themselves. You seem to be enjoying yourself. Reminded me of my father when I was younger. My dad, he wanted me to lift weights when I was 9-10 years old. He had a weight bench for me. I said, Dad, I'm a little young for that, but I want to play basketball and soccer. But he was very wise. He understands the importance of strength training, and I think a big part of how this came to be was my father and his story, and my mother and her story actually as well, and how over the last few years she hired a personal trainer, and she's lost a significant amount of weight, and my wife has incorporated physical activity in her day, and so all of these like huge touch points came to be. Talk about how you're balancing your life here with life at home, and what your focus on health and wellness means to you and how it positively impacts your career.
Yeah, I mean, I could go in 1,000 different directions with this, but I will say that I'm still learning how to balance everything. I always tend to lean to work. I like work. I'm a family man, as you just described. Like with my social channels, I'm with my family a lot. Like I'm there at night, on the weekends. I go to my kids' choir stuff and performances and dance stuff. Like I'm there for my kids, and I think that's the most important thing. That's my why. It's like I do what I do at work so that I can have the freedom to be able to be with them and see them grow. On the other hand, it is hard to balance because my kids are 7 and 6 years old. They're still very dependent on me. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me at work. So there's a lot of times where I'm really stressed out. I got anxiety. I probably could be more healthy. A couple of years ago, I was just in a dark place. I was not feeling great. I was not exercising. I was stagnant, like just sitting at my desk all the time and not taking the time. Maybe I'd go for a walk or something, but I was not looking good. I don't think I looked good. I was really thin. 150 pounds or something like that. Just looked disgusting in my eyes, especially if I look at pictures going back. And about 3 years ago, I was like, I need to get moving. Like if I'm going to really feel good, I was always good about like the mental, the health. Like I'd read, I would try meditating, I'd try journaling, things like that. But the physical stuff, and I've always been an athlete, so getting away from that will almost make me a little depressed in a way. So 3 years ago, I was like, I'm going to start working out, and it's going to be at least 3 days a week, just even move for 30 minutes. And there's no excuses because you can work out at home. There's videos, I bought some kettlebells, and I just started doing that. And I think I told you on my podcast last time you were here that I took a before picture of myself and how gross I was, right? And then I would take like weekly, monthly pictures, and I would see that those quick wins, the feedback. I gained some weight, muscle mass, and I started looking good. Had the 6-pack going on, like all these things. I was starting to look good, so I wanted to do it more. It was like an incentive for me to keep going. So here I am now. I'm 175 pounds. I've gained 18 pounds of muscle, and I feel a lot better. But all that said, I still have a lot of work to do. I probably drink too much alcohol. I probably eat crappy foods every once in a while, but at least I got the exercise going and the mental health aspect. I've got that dialed in, and I do focus on that. So, balance is tough. You have to be intentional about it, and I'm still working on it.
Well, Brand, I just congratulations. You've done a lot, and I think we're all hard on ourselves in various ways and means, and you've expressed that. At the same time, you've achieved a lot, and I think it's interesting. You're talking about muscle mass and weight gain, and that's a huge misperception and always a challenge I talk to people about is lifting weights is good. Like you need to build muscle, and if you gain weight initially, that's okay. Like it's going to come down. These are people who need to lose weight, right?
Sure, yeah.
You're going to gain weight, but then your clothes are going to feel better. You're going to burn more calories, and ultimately you're going to slim down. And that's always a challenge that I definitely like to talk to personal trainer friends of mine and be like, you need to hit home with your clients about this. Like, then they're going to be starting to lift weights, and they're going to start. They should not be looking at the scale for a few days or a week because they're going to get frustrated. But their clothes are going to start feeling better. And
that's so true. Yeah, I think initially looking at the scale or even looking at pictures of yourself, whatever feedback loop that is for you, I think initially it's always going to be tough because you're like, I'm working so hard, especially in that first week, and you're like, I'm not seeing any results. Well, it's like it probably takes a good 3, 4, or 5 weeks and consistency around it. And that's the hard part about habits like that sticking is it does take time, and you got to be patient.
Yeah, absolutely do. And we need more people like you to say that because we need people to understand that a 14-day cleanse, 7-day cleanse, a 13-day keto diet.
It's a quick fix. It's not.
Quick, and we've talked about this before. Absolutely. So, you talk a lot about reading. What are you already listed a lot of books. What would you say are some of the most influential books you've read?
Yeah, and I knew you were going to ask me this one, so I had to go back through because I've read so many books, and the ones that always stick out in my mind were probably the ones early on that I read. So I have a couple ones that I wanted to share with people. So the most foundational book that I probably read like 5, 6 times. Actually, I listened to this one a lot too, so I might have listened to it like 10 times. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. I think people have the hardest time connecting nowadays. Social media and all the people hide behind computers, so connecting with people, you'd be surprised how hard it is. And people lean on talking about themselves first and have self-centered conversations, whereas like you should really be thinking about what the other person wants and getting them what they want. So that book is really helpful. Atomic Habits I read within the last year. James Clear, that one was great, and the idea behind that is if you just got 1% better every day, think about how exponentially better you'd be in 1 year, 10 years. So read that one because it talks about the micro habits. It's great.
It's the 401k of kind of the rest of the right,
compounding,
compound.
Love it. So. Yeah. And then there was a book I read within the last year. It's called What Got You There Won't Get You There. And that was sort of it's by Marshall Goldsmith. And there's so many like great nuggets in that. And it was a lot about habits, a lot about leadership, and it's about success overall. So I highly recommend that one. And then I gave you a bonus book right here. So a fiction-based book that I read years ago is 1,001 page or 1,100 pages. Atlas Shrugged.
Oh my gosh!
I had to put that in there. So I was like I was really into economics and
Sure.
business and anti-government and whatnot. So I'm more of a free market guy. And this
Right.
book was like the Bible of free market economists.
Absolutely.
And it was kind of fun because it
Yeah.
was like, you know, people who earn and have success is like, why take stuff away from it? So it's a fun story.
Sure.
It's really long if you have I had to put that in there though.
Audiobook, perhaps, version of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have a 60-hour audiobook, then go for it.
Those are great. Oh my gosh. We're going to be publishing this in January 2020.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about resolutions. I don't necessarily subscribe to them. When I started my weight loss, I started in December. I didn't start in January. There's a lot of science behind why they don't work. At the same time, people still keep coming back to it. I feel like it's because people are genuinely positive, and they like to think positive, and they want to move forward, and they want to make a change, and so I want them to thrive on
Sure.
that. At the same time, the reality is that they don't necessarily come to fruition. But I like to think of the world as half glass full, so I want to support people who do that. What's your take on resolutions, and what do you have in store for 2020 if so?
I'm not big on resolutions, partly because of how people treat them. I think I know what my end goal is. That's kind of how I look at it. Is I know what my compass is. I know where I want to be later on in life, and I think I know what the steps are to get there. And so I kind of look at it as like I have this another book. It's the 40X model, and it's like this idea of like you have this big, hairy, audacious goal or whatever, and then you have these leading and lagging indicators based on how you like what you need to do to get to that goal, and you can measure success along the way. And I think of my life a lot like that. Like I know that I want to have multiple millions of dollars so I can retire and have time with my family. So what does that mean now? Well, I need to max out my 401k.
Right.
I need to be investing in real estate, like all these other things, right? And so those, I don't really have new resolutions every year. Maybe I want to try some new things, but it's not like learn a new language. I'm probably going to set myself up for failure. So I'm pretty realistic about it. Most of my resolutions, if they are resolutions, are pretty much consistent year after year.
Yeah.
Max out my 401k, increase my income, increase my freelance income, because I do some marketing, freelancing, exercise 4 or 5 times a week for at least 30 minutes. And then the other one that's not really measurable is just connect with more people regularly, you know, text my brother every once in a while, call my mom, you know,
Call your mom.
go visit my grandparents, connect with friends who I haven't seen in a while, like that kind of stuff. But it's, how do you measure that? I don't really know if it's a resolution or not. So that's how I think of it.
Doing it, number of texts, maybe, figure out how many texts you send this year and increase it by 10%.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they're atomic habits. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Brandon, this has been awesome.
This has been a lot of fun.
What else should our listeners know?
So if you want to hear me on some podcasts, I do a ton of podcasting. I have one, you mentioned Transform Your Workplace. We talk about leadership and HR and small business type stuff. So I have a lot of expert author interviews that in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I interviewed the JetBlue Airways chairman.
Yeah,
so that
awesome.
was released, and there's a couple other really good interviews there. And then I actually have one on my personal side as well. I have one called Talkin' Entertainment from Rip City, and it's me and a buddy. We just talk about movies, sports, TV, and sometimes video games. I'm not a huge gamer, but he is, so he'll slide those in there. But we bantered. There's a lot of cussing in it, so just beware of that. But it's fun, and I like to keep myself fresh and have some fun.
I've listened to it. It's great, and I talk a little bit about Blazers too. I think
a little bit, yeah. Sometimes it's hard because with Blazers, there's so many games throughout the week.
Yeah.
So if I can't record it and publish it immediately, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
Yeah. So you talk about your podcast. Where can people find you online?
Online, so I'm heavily into Instagram. Laws Brandon is my handle there, and then Twitter. I'm there frequently, more viewing than anything else, and I'm Brandon Laws on Twitter, and I mean that's pretty much it. LinkedIn, I'm heavily involved in LinkedIn too.
Absolutely. Brandon, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think a great start to 2020. Just congratulations on everything. Keep going. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mark. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
See you.
I want to thank Brandon for his time, his wisdom, and his list of books that are on my to-do list for 2020 and beyond. This is Mark Mohammadpour, Chasing the Sun. Email me at mark, M-A-R-K, at chasingthesunpdx.com. Find me on Twitter or Instagram at markmo, M-A-R-K-M-O-H. I have lost and kept off more than 140 pounds, and my mission is to be able to help you prioritize your health and wellness so you can reduce stress, grow in your career, and thrive. Message me. I want to work with you to help you live your best life. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your time, and chat soon.